For more on investing in Chinese agriculture companies, we're joined by David Chen, principal with the Equilibrium Group, based in Portland, Oregon. David, good to have you on the show again. Let me start by having you answer the question for our viewers. You maintain a lot of investments in this space, what we call as sustainable investments. Help explain what that is.
You know, in general, sustainable investments are investments in the areas of food, water, shelter, energy, land, agricultural goods. You know, I like to think of this as all the basics that basically correlate to a growing demographics, the population of the world, the fact that we have a finite planet, and what are the resources that are the basic human needs. And as you can imagine, with the growing demographics, we've got an increased demand for sustainability-driven investment strategies.
Well, I want to follow up on that. We heard in the last story about some of the challenges facing China, not only with its population, but also with its changing demographics in terms of the type of foods that are being eaten as well. Give us your take on what you see are the trends and where the opportunities exist for investors to profit from.
Anytime you've got tension that takes place in a market between supply and demand, you've got opportunity, but you've also got risk. And the whole area of sustainability is no different. So in the last report, we heard that the Chinese demographics, in effect, it's all about the protein consumption. So you've got large populations in China, India, the other developing countries that are starting to swap out a grain-based diet or a vegetable-based diet for a protein-based diet, in other words, meat. And when you translate that, it takes 3 pounds of grain to get a pound of chicken. It takes 7 pounds of grain to get a pound of pork, and it takes 9 to 10 pounds of grain to get you a pound of beef. And you can do the math. What used to feed 9 families now feeds 1. On the other side of the ledger, you've got climate change, or maybe I should say climate instability. We've got droughts in Australia, fires, we've got drought in the US, we've got drought in China, and then we've got competing uses of land. The encroachment of towns and cities that take up very valuable countryside and rural agricultural communities.
So David, you've got at least already 3, if I'm doing my math correctly, 3 big areas of change in terms of trends. But in terms of specific sectors, what sectors is a company like yours who invests specifically in these type of investments, what subsectors would you be looking at in terms of for the next couple of years?
We think the whole area of water consumption, data management that looks at a piece of land and analyzes what inputs. You know, basically it's one of the old sayings about farming in the modern society is that farming boils down to water and carbon, basically oil. And it goes into fertilizer, it goes into the basic commodities necessary to farm. So look around the edges, not only look within the core of agriculture, and you've seen a huge run-up in agricultural land values across the world, but look around the adjacencies. So water management, data management, energy management, input management. Look also at what we call farm and agricultural logistics. You know, it's one thing to grow it. You got to get it to market. And we know that in developing countries like India, one of the critical issues, one of the expenses, one of the inefficiencies of the market is getting it to market. And so there's just a huge value chain opportunity within agriculture.
Speaking of growing, a lot of companies, I'm sure you've been approached at doing particular investments, especially in China. When you go into a country like China and you look at specific investments, we go through the due diligence process, which is the research. Walk us through how you do the due diligence and how the due diligence for these type of companies are very different than, say, for example, a manufacturing or a technology company.
Well, in some ways, one of the most basic things of due diligence is always the trust in the team. But in agriculture, even more so is the rights of ownership and the property rights. Does the land, in fact, belong to the supposed owner? Is there clean title? You're also looking at the changing regulatory. Oftentimes in agriculture, the proceeds, the profits, the returns are in some way or another linked to regulation. So how stable are the regulatory environments? what are the various investor rights. So in some ways they're the same, but in other ways you have to look deeper at sort of the underlying regulation, and that way it bears some resemblance to the commercial real estate business.
David, I want to thank you for your expertise on this area in terms of finding out what opportunities and challenges face the agricultural industry in China.